Round 1, question 1 of the lightning round. Good. The losing side in this battle was weakened by an earlier battle that took place at Stamford Bridge, and an arrow was shot through the eye of the losing commander, Harold Godwinson. For 10 points, name this 1066 battle depicted on the Bayeux Tapestry in which William the Conqueror led the Norman invaders into England to win the English throne. The answer is the Battle of Hastings. Question 2. This event led to the accusation and trial of women such as Martha Corey and was agitated by a sermon of Reverend Paris. For 10 points, what is this event that began after 2 adolescent girls accused a woman of deceit in Massachusetts? The answer is Salem witch trials. Question 3. The Treaty of Lisbon sought to reform this body. This body was originated in the European coal and steel community, and it was created with the signing of the Treaty of Maastricht. For 10 points, name this community composed of France, Britain, and 25 other countries. The answer is the European Union. Question 4. The Vickers scale is an alternative to this scale whose measure can be found using a sclerometer. This scale ranks appetite as a 5 and calcite as a 3. For 10 points, name the scale that measures scratch resistance that begins with talc at 1 and diamond at 10. The answer is the Mohs hardness scale. Question 5. This composer of Fanfare for the Common Man wrote a ballet that follows an outlaw called Billy the Kid, and another of his works contains the melody Simple Gifts. For 10 points, name this American composer of Rodeo and Appalachian Spring. Answer is Aaron Copland. Question 6. This object was discovered at Fort Julien by some French soldiers and was deciphered by Jean-François Champollion. For 10 points, what is this artifact that had 3 languages on it, allowing linguists to decipher ancient Egyptian hieroglyphics? The answer is the Rosetta Stone. Question 7. The Seyfert variety of these objects have nuclei that produce spectral line emission from highly ionized gas. For 10 points, name these objects that also come in starburst, elliptical, spiral varieties, an example of which is the Milky Way. The answer is galaxies. Question 8. This man wrote the poems The Wreck of the Hesperus and Tales of a Wayside Inn and was one of the fireside poets. For 10 points, who is this American poet of Paul Revere's Ride, The Song of Hiawatha, and Evangeline? The answer is Henry Wadsworth Longfellow. Question 9. This action occurs from the 8th to the 12th day of Dhu al-Hijjah, the last month of the Islamic calendar. For 10 points, identify this 5th pillar of Islam, a religious duty of Muslims to partake in a pilgrimage to Mecca at least once in their lifetime. Question 10. This man composed a compilation of world geography during the Roman Empire, and his Almagest is one of the most influential scientific pieces of all times. For 10 points, name this ancient Roman astronomer whose geocentric theory would be accepted for centuries. Answer is Ptolemy. Okay, question 1 of the Tossup and Bonus round. This man gave a speech that was considered to be America's intellectual declaration of independence by Oliver Wendell Holmes. This author also coined the term "the shot heard around the world" in his poem Concord Hymn. A speech given to the Phi Beta Kappa Society at Harvard was in recognition of an essay in which he referred to himself as a transparent eyeball. In addition to The American Scholar and Nature, this author wrote a work that claims that a foolish consistency is the hobgoblin of little minds to criticize conformity. For 10 points, name this author of the essay Self-Reliance. Answer is Ralph Waldo Emerson. And for 5 extra points, Emerson was a leading figure of what era of literature that was a protest of society in the early 1800s? The answer is Transcendentalism. Question 2. This man built on an earlier work called The Future of an Illusion and another work by describing the supremacy of a concept he devised. In addition to writing Civilization and its Discontents, this psychologist also wrote a work taking cultural examples from Australian Aborigines that includes the section The Horrors of Incest in Totem and Taboo. This psychologist also wrote a work which features the title concepts that he believed are all forms of wish fulfillment. For 10 points, name the psychologist who lost many of his followers over the issue of neurosis and wrote The Interpretation of Dreams. Answer is Sigmund Freud. For 5 extra points, Freud founded what theory of psychology that states that human thoughts and actions are determined by irrational drives? The answer is psychoanalysis. Question 3. In one poem by this man, the speaker says that nature's first green is gold, her hardest hue to hold. In addition to writing the poem Nothing Gold Can Stay, he wrote that the deed of gift was many deeds of war, and the land was ours before we were the land's, in his poem The Gift Outright. In another poem by this man, the narrator likes to think some boy's been swinging the poem's titular objects. That poem is Birches, In another poem by this man, the speaker's ultimate decision has made all the difference. That work depicts a traveler's dilemma of choosing which path to take. For 10 points, name this American poet of the road not taken. The answer is Robert Frost. For 5 extra points, what Frost poem depicts a young boy dying after severing his hand via a buzzsaw? The answer is Out Out. Question 4. This figure worked for a summer for the giant Balgi so that the giant would convince his brother to allow this figure to drink the mead of poetry. This god sits atop the throne Hilchgaf, from which he can see all of existence, and he has 2 companions, Gary and Freki, 2 wolves that sit beside him, as well as the 8-legged horse Sleipnir. This god hung himself from Yggdrasil for 9 days so that he may learn the many secrets of the runes, and upon his shoulders sit 2 ravens, Hugin and Munin. For 10 points, name this god, the husband of Frigg, father of Thor, and chief god of Norse mythology. The answer is Odin. For 5 extra points, what is the name of Odin's spear that always pierces its target cleanly through? The answer is Gungnir. Question 5. A fundamental result of the summability of the Fourier series, known as Parseval's identity, describes this law in inner product space. The 3-dimensional analog of this theorem is Degua's theorem, and the spiral of Theodorus is made of polygons that obey this theorem, which does not hold in non-Euclidean geometry. 2 of the namesake triples of this theorem are always odd, and this theorem was known centuries previously by the Babylonians and the Indians. Trigonometric identities are derived from, for 10 points, what theorem for right triangles that states that the square of the hypotenuse is equal to the sum of the squares of the legs? The answer is the Pythagorean theorem. For 5 extra points, name the mathematician that stated the Pythagorean theorem does not hold for powers greater than 2 in his last theorem. Answer is Pierre de Fermat. Question 6. One of the tributaries of this river has its source in the Bolkar mountain range southeast of Hakkari and is known as the Kabor. The under construction Ilusu Dam on this river has come under controversy because it will flood the ancient township Hassan Kaif. This river rises in the Taurus Mountains and flows through Saddam Hussein's hometown Tikrit after flowing past Mosul, a city opposite the ancient Assyrian capital of Nineveh. This river serves as Syria's easternmost border with Turkey and contains the capital of Iraq, Baghdad, on its banks. For 10 points, name this river that is the shorter and easternmost of the 2 major rivers of Mesopotamia. For 5 extra... the answer, is the Tigris River. For 5 extra points, name the other Mesopotamian river that joins the Tigris in the Shat al-Arab. Answer is the Euphrates. Question 7. In this work, one character is killed by a lynx while searching for food, and that character's mate eventually kills the lynx and devours the carcass for 7 days. The work begins with 2 characters known as Bill and Henry transporting the body of Lord Alfred, but soon thereafter Bill is killed after firing his only 3 bullets. The title character, the child of Kish and One Eye, is taken under the ring of Greybeaver, but is tormented by Lip Lip. The title character is used by Beauty Smith as a fighter until he almost dies in one fight and is bought by Whedon Smith. For 10 points, name this Jack London novel about a 3/4 wolf that is tamed. Answer is White Fang. For 5 extra points, name this other Jack London novel that was companion to White Fang that is about a dog named Buck that becomes a sled dog. The answer is The Call of the Wild. The hypabyssal variety of these entities are found between the plutonic and volcanic rocks and sometimes form laccoliths. This type of rock is considered either pheneritic or phenitic, depending on whether or not they have crystals large enough to be seen with the naked eye. This rock type includes andesite and periodite, and depending on their silicon content, these rocks are classified as felsic or mafic. Batholiths are large formations made up of them, and examples of them include basalt and granite. Coming in intrusive and extrusive varieties, for 10 points, name this type of rock, which is formed by the cooling of lava or magma. Answer is igneous rock. For 5 extra points, name this other type of rock that is formed by transformation of an existing rock type. The answer is metamorphic rock. Question 9. The people of Dedham, Massachusetts opposed this agreement and sent a petition to Senator Edward Everett. This compromise extended Article 6 of the Northwest Ordinance, and Lincoln sought to repeal this agreement in his Peoria speech. This compromise passed without the Talmadge Amendment, and it was repealed by the Kansas-Nebraska Act, and was declared unconstitutional by the Dred Scott case. The passing of this agreement was influenced heavily by Henry Clay, and it prohibited slavery above the 3630 parallel. For 10 points, name this 1820 compromise that admitted the namesake state to the Union as a slave state. The answer is the Missouri Compromise. Question for 5 extra points, name the state that was admitted into the Union as a free state due to the Missouri Compromise. And this is Maine. Question 10. This man wrote The Epitome of the Treasure of Health, written by Edwardus Generosus Anglicus, a treatise on the Philosopher's Stone. This man wrote a work in which he proved his propositions by use of flexions, as opposed to geometry, which is what he used in a more famous work. That work is on the nature of light, color, and various phenomena of diffraction, and is entitled Optics. His more famous work of physics describes his inverse square law of universal gravitation, and is known as Principia Mathematica. For 10 points, name this man, the namesake of the unit of force, who formulated calculus and 3 laws of motion. The answer is Sir Isaac Newton. Then, for 5 extra points, name this German philosopher who argued that we live in the best of all possible worlds and formulated calculus independent of Newton. The answer is Gottfried Wilhelm Leibniz. Okay, question 1 of the Supertossup Round. The results of this experiment were questioned by Gerald Holton, who argued that the performer disregarded too many elements without reason. The experiment invoked a law that involves spherical objects with very low Reynolds numbers and a continuous viscous fluid for drag force, Stokes' law. The experiment implemented a parallel pair of horizontal metal plates with a potential across them, which created an electric field. The standard error of 2% in this experiment was due to an incorrect value for the viscosity of air. The experiment used particles that had reached terminal velocity and measured the point where those particles reached an equilibrium. For 10 points, identify this experiment that determined the charge of an electron performed by Harvey Fletcher and Robert Millikan. The answer is the oil drop experiment. Question 2. This man was an active dealer in Japanese ukiyo-e woodblock prints aside from his fame as being an architect. This man is known for designing the 14-story Johnson Wax Research Tower, and he designed the reconstruction of a building in Tokyo, Japan, the Imperial Hotel. His summer home and studio, the Taliesin Studio, was where he designed some of his most famous works, one of which houses many pieces by Rudolf Bauer, Hilary Bay, and P. Mondrian. That work, the Guggenheim Museum, was one of this architect's last works. This architect was also a leader of a school of architecture that was exemplified by works such as the Westcott House and Roby House. For 10 points, name this architect of the Prairie School, the designer of Falling Water. The answer is Frank Lloyd Wright. Question 3. This thinker was criticized by Martin Arons and created the study of culture at a distance with Rhoda Matreau. This anthropologist recorded a conversation on tape with James Baldwin called A Rap on Race, and she found that females were dominant in the Chambuli region in one work. That work also found that the males and females of the Arapesh were peaceful in nature, while the opposite was true of the Mundugamor. In addition to writing Sex and Temperament in 3 Primitive Societies, this author wrote a work stating that chicken blood could be used to circumvent the Taupo system of ceremonial virginity and was criticized by Derek Freeman. That work sees her research of the youth on the island of Tau, focusing primarily on adolescent girls. For 10 points, name this anthropologist who wrote Coming of Age in Samoa. The answer is Margaret Mead. This composer's first opera, The Lame Devil, is now lost, and he also wrote an opera based on Torquato Tasso's Jerusalem Delivered, called Armida. This man composed the Great Organ Mass and Little Organ Mass, as well as 175 compositions of baritone trios for his patron Nicholas Esterhazy. He is also known for composing 6 works known as his Sun Quartets. He is more well known, however, for his works with the librettist Gottfried von Swieten on 2 works, those 2 works being the oratorios, the Seasons, and the Creation. This man composed a group of symphonies, which are called his London Symphonies, that includes the Surprise and the Clock Symphonies. He also composed a symphony that sees all of the musicians get up and leave by the end. For 10 points, name this composer of the Farewell Symphony that is also the father of the symphony and father of the string quartet. The answer is Franz Joseph Haydn. Question 5. This man advocated persecution and anti-Semitism on the Jews and their lies. Although he sympathized with the grievances of the Zwickau prophets, this man condemned the violence of the Peasants' War and against the murderous, thieving hordes of peasants. This man was excommunicated with the papal bull Decet Romanum Pontificum after being warned with the bull Exsurge Dominum. Frederick III of Saxony protected this man at Wartburg Castle after he was declared an outlaw by the Diet of Worms. This man allegedly objected to Johann Tetzel's sale of indulgences by nailing a list of grievances on the door of the Wittenberg Cathedral. For 10 points, name this Augustinian monk who kicked off the Protestant Reformation with the 95 Theses. The answer is Martin Luther. This author wrote that the calm, cool face of the river asked me for a kiss in his poem Suicide's Note. This poet wrote the collections Fine Clothes a Jew and The Dreamkeeper, as well as a poem about a woman who says, I's been a climbing on, and asserts that life for me ain't been no crystal stair, in Mother to Son. He wrote one poem that features a man playing a drowsy, syncopated tune called The Weary Blues. He wrote another work in which he states that he likes Bach, Bop, and Bessie after an instructor tells him to write a page in his theme for English B. He wrote that his soul has grown deep like the Congo, Nile, and the Mississippi. In another poem, he ponders if the title concept would fester like a sore or dry up like a raisin in the sun. For 10 points, name this Harlem Renaissance poet of The Negro Speaks of Rivers and A Dream Deferred. Answer is Langston Hughes. Question 7. After winning the Battle of Arar, this leader failed to negotiate with Divico and fought the Battle of Bibracte, resulting in the defeat of the Helvetii. This man also defeated the Suebi under Arvostus at the Battle of Vosges and crucified a bunch of Cilician pirates that had ransomed him for 20 talents. This general constructed a ring of fortifications at the Battle of Alesia, where he captured Vercingetorix and led 2 invasions of Britain. He chronicled his conquests in commentaries on the Gallic Wars, and also defeated a rival at the Battle of Pharsalus. According to Suetonius, this man said the die is cast after crossing the Rubicon to start a civil war with Pompey, a fellow member of the First Triumvirate. For 10 points, name this ancient Roman leader who was assassinated by Brutus and Cassius on the Ides of March in 44 BCE. Answer is Julius Caesar. Question 8. One of the elements in this group is necessary to mediate the action of the inhibitory transmitter GABA. The heaviest example is the rarest naturally occurring element on Earth, and an element from this group, along with an organomagnesium, forms the Grignard reagent. A bimolecular nucleophilic substitution known as the Finkelstein reaction will exchange these elements for others from this group in compounds. The deficiency of one of these elements is the cause of goiter, and that element is part of Lugol solution, which is used to detect for starches by turning blue. Besides being the only group to contain the 3 states of matter at room temperature, elements in this group have 7 valence shell electrons. For 10 points, name this group who is also referred to as Group 7A or Group 17 on the periodic table that includes astatine, bromine, fluorine, iodine, and chlorine. The answer is halogens. The early lectures of this man are contained in his Lectures on Jurisprudence, which also contains an early draft of his most famous work. This thinker proposed that the motive for morality was self-love, while the nature of morality was property, prudence, and benevolence. These ideas appeared in his work The Theory of Moral Sentiments. The last section of the magnum opus of this thinker discusses taxation and explains why debts from wars are unlikely to be paid off, and is entitled Of the Revenue of the Sovereign or Commonwealth. That work studies pin factories to illustrate the idea of division of labor and claims that individuals will benefit society through self-interest. For 10 points, name the Scottish economist who created the idea of an invisible hand that governs free markets in his work The Wealth of Nations. The answer is Adam Smith. Question 10. This author of The Wolf Leader also wrote a novel about Maurice Linley set during the Reign of Terror, the night of the Maison Rouge. He also wrote a novel which begins with the 1672 lynching of the Dutch Grand Pensionary Johann de Witt and his brother Cornelis, and also features a prize of 100,000 guilders to the person that can grow the title object, the Black Tulip. This man also wrote a sequel to one of his more famous novels that occurs during the Fronde and involves Mordaunt, who kills his mother's executioner. That novel, 20 years after, is the sequel to a work that sees Constance, the love of the narrator, murdered by Milady de Winter, and also includes the title characters Athos, Porthos, and Aramis. For 10 points, name this author who wrote The Three Musketeers and The Count of Monte Cristo. Answer is Alexander Dumas.